Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling autism spectrum disorder, or ASD.
That's right.
We've had some really thoughtful inquiries about this, actually. It signals, a deep curiosity to understand this complex neurodevelopmental condition.
It really is complex.
So our goal today is to kind of cut through all the information out there and pull out the key insights, hopefully giving you a clearer, more nuanced picture of what ASD really involves.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be looking at, well, the definition, its history.
Right, prevalence, the impact it has.
The biology behind it, even some ethical points, and interestingly, the role AI might play.
And connections to things like social behavior, too.
Okay.
Let's dive in.
Great. So starting with the basics, what actually is ASD? Our sources define it pretty clearly as a neurodevelopmental condition.
Okay, neurodevelopmental, so brain development.
Exactly. And it's characterized by differences in social interaction, communication, and also the presence of restricted and repetitive behaviors or interests.
Okay, and that keyword spectrum is huge here, isn't it? It's not just one thing.
Not at all. That's maybe the most important takeaway.
Yeah.
The presentation, the support needs, they vary incredibly widely from person to person.
Right. So the DSM-5, the diagnostic manual, it gives criteria.
It does. It gives a framework.
Yeah.
Criterion A that focuses on deficits in social communication and interaction. Difficulties with back and forth conversation, understanding nonverbal cues, body language, tone of voice, and building or maintaining a relationship. Those sorts of intuitive social skills.
Okay, those unwritten rules of how we interact. Got it. In Criterion B.
Criterion B covers the restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities.
What kind of things fall under that umbrella?
Well, it can be things like a real insistence on sameness, getting quite distressed if routines change.
Okay.
Highly focused, intense interest in specific topics. Also, sensory sensitivities, being over or underreactive to sounds, lights, textures, smells.
Ah, right. Sensory issues.
Yes. And repetitive motor movements or speech patterns can fall under Criterion B, too. So the DSM gives us these criteria. C through E basically ensure onset is early, it causes impairment, and isn't better explained by something else. But it's just a framework.
Yeah, understanding the individual experience is key, not just checking boxes.
Precisely.
So it could be anything from needing that specific morning routine, like you said, to having this just incredible encyclopedic knowledge about, train schedules or something.
Exactly, that kind of range. And the DSM-5 also includes severity levels, levels 1, 2, and 3, which indicate the level of support someone might require in their daily life.
Okay. And there was another related condition mentioned, SCD.
Right, social pragmatic communication disorder. People with SCD have difficulties with the social aspects of communication, like understanding context or non-literal language.
But not the repetitive behaviors.
Exactly. They don't have those restricted interests or repetitive behaviors that are part of Criterion B for ASD. That's the key distinction, according to our sources.
And this single ASD diagnosis now, it brought together older terms.
Yes, it consolidated previous diagnoses like autistic disorder, Asperger syndrome, and PDD-LS under one umbrella.
Yeah.
It reflects that spectrum understanding we talked about.
Okay, so our understanding has definitely evolved. It wasn't always like this. Let's look back at the history.
Yeah, the history is fascinating and kind of bumpy. The term autism itself was first used way back early 20th century, but by Eugen Bleuler in the context of schizophrenia, describing withdrawal.
Oh, interesting. Not related to children initially, then.
Not in the way we think of it now. That came later, in the 1940s, with two key figures working independently. Leo Kanner in the U.S. and Hans Asperger in Austria.
Right, Kanner and Asperger.
Kanner described what he called early infantile autism, children with social withdrawal and a desire for sameness. Asperger described children, often boys, who had social difficulties and intense interests, but generally better language skills.
Must have been such a confusing time for families before these ideas started to form.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the mid-20th century brought the completely baseless refrigerator mother theory.
Oh, yes, blaming parents.
Totally unfounded, blamed cold parenting. Thankfully, by the 1960s and 70s, research started pointing strongly towards biological neurodevelopmental roots.
A major shift.
A huge shift. And the diagnostic manuals reflected this. The DSM-3 in 1980 listed infantile autism as distinct. Then came revisions, leading eventually to the unified ASD diagnosis in DSM-5 we use now. It really shows that journey from, well, harmful speculation to a more scientific neurodevelopmental understanding.
Okay, so that brings us to today. How common is ASD? What are the prevalence numbers?
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, the numbers are significant. The World Health Organization estimates globally maybe around 1 in 100 children.
1 in 100 globally.
But in the U.S., recent CDC data suggests it might be closer to 1 in 31 children aged 8.
Wow, 1 in 31. That's quite a bit higher than the global estimate. Why the difference?
It's likely a mix of things. Different countries have different ways of tracking and diagnosing, different levels of awareness, different resources for screening.
Makes sense.
And we've definitely seen a trend of increasing reported prevalence pretty much everywhere over the last few decades.
So the big question then is it really increasing, or are we just getting much better at spotting it?
The general consensus leans heavily towards the latter. Increased awareness is huge, both public and professional. Diagnostic criteria have broadened over time, like including Asperger's under the ASD umbrella, and screening methods are just better. Earlier identification is happening more.
So better detection, mostly.
That seems to be the main driver, yes. While we can't rule out some actual increase, the evidence points strongly towards improved recognition.
And what about demographics? Does it affect everyone equally? I think I saw something about a male-female ratio.
Yeah, traditionally ASD has been diagnosed more often in males, maybe 3 or 4 times more often than in females.
Okay.
But interestingly, recent U.S. data suggests that gap might be narrowing a bit.
Why would that be?
Possibly better recognition and diagnosis in girls and women who might present differently sometimes. But it's really important to stress. ASD occurs across all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups. It's not limited to any one group.
So it's a widespread global condition with pretty significant implications.
Absolutely. When you consider the prevalence, the fact that it's lifelong, and the diverse support needs, it places, a real demand on healthcare, education, employment systems. It really highlights why ongoing research and robust support systems are just so crucial.
Let's dig into that impact a bit more. What are the main ways ASD affects people's lives?
It really spans across many areas. The core differences are in social communication and interaction. And this isn't just about being shy. It's more fundamental differences in picking up social cues, sharing emotions back and forth, initiating and maintaining relationships.
Okay.
And there's this concept called the double empathy problem, which is really important.
Double empathy.
Yeah, it suggests that communication breakdowns aren't just one-sided, like an autistic person having a deficit. It's often a mismatch in communication styles and understanding between autistic and non-autistic people. It goes both ways.
That's a really interesting perspective, shifts the focus.
It does. Then you have the restricted and repetitive behaviors and interests we talked about earlier.
Right, the need for sameness, the intense interests.
Exactly. Motor movements, how objects are used, speech patterns, insistence on routines, those deep dives into specific topics. And it's key to understand these often serve a real purpose.
Like self-soothing.
Yeah, or self-regulation, providing predictability, managing anxiety in a world that can feel chaotic or overwhelming.
And sensory processing seems like a huge piece of the puzzle for many.
Oh, absolutely. Many autistic individuals experience senses differently. They might be hypersensitive, so sounds are too loud, lights too bright, textures unbearable.
Oh.
Exactly. Or they might be hyposensitive, needing more sensory input, maybe seeking out strong flavors or deep pressure. These differences can massively impact daily life, which is why things like sensory-friendly environments are so important.
It sounds like learning and development can also look quite different.
Very much so.
Yeah.
There's a huge range of intellectual abilities on the spectrum. Some individuals might face learning challenges, yes, but many have incredible strengths.
Such as?
Often things like visual thinking, incredible attention to detail, pattern recognition, logical thinking. Education really needs to tap into these strengths, not just focus on the challenges. Executive functioning, planning, organizing, starting tasks can sometimes be difficult too.
And all this obviously impacts just everyday living independence.
Definitely. Things many people take for granted, like personal hygiene, preparing meals, managing time and money, can require explicit teaching and practice for some autistic individuals. Transitions like moving into adulthood, finding work, living independently, these can present big hurdles without the right support.
It's clear ASD touches almost every part of life. So let's switch gears a bit. What does the science tell us about the biological roots?
What's becoming really clear is that it's multifactorial. There isn't one single cause. It's a complex interplay between genetic factors and environmental influences that shape early brain development.
Okay, so not just genes, not just environment, but a mix.
Precisely.
Oh.
There's a very strong genetic component. Heritability estimates are quite high, suggesting genes play a major role.
Major.
Well, estimates vary, but often cited in the range of 40–80% or even higher. Research has identified, believe it or not, over 1,000 genes potentially associated with ASD risk.
1,000. Wow.
Yeah, it's complex. The current thinking is that for many people, it's likely the combined effect of many common genetic variations, each having a small impact. But in some cases, rarer specific gene mutations might have a more direct, significant effect.
So genetics are a big piece, but not the whole story. What about environmental factors?
They also seem to play a role, though it's harder to pin down specifics. Factors being researched include things like advanced parental age, certain complications during pregnancy or birth, paternal health conditions during pregnancy. It's likely an interaction, an underlying genetic predisposition interacting with certain environmental factors during critical periods of brain development.
And what about the brain itself? Are there visible differences?
Neuroimaging studies, like MRI scans, have shown some differences in brain structure and function, yes. These can include variations in how certain brain areas develop early on, like the amygdala, which is involved in emotion,
Okay.
and the corpus callosum, the big structure connecting the brain's two hemispheres. There's also evidence for differences in how neurons grow and how connections are pruned or refined during development.
Pruning, like trimming away unused connections.
Exactly. And maybe differences in the thickness or volume of the cortex in certain areas. These structural and functional differences likely contribute to the diverse characteristics we see in ASD.
I think I read about an underconnectivity theory. What's that?
Yeah, that theory suggests there might be less efficient long-range communication between distant brain regions in autism, alongside potentially increased local connectivity within specific areas.
So different wiring patterns, basically.
Kind of. And researchers also see atypical patterns of brain activation when autistic individuals process sensory information or social stimuli. The nitty-gritty involves things like synapses, the junctions between neurons, synaptic plasticity, which is the brain's ability to change, and how whole neural circuits function. It's all interconnected.
Fascinating, but clearly very complex. Now, looking ahead, AI, artificial intelligence, keeps coming up. What's the potential there?
There's definitely a lot of excitement and potential. One big area is early detection and diagnosis.
How would AI help with that?
Well, AI algorithms can crunch huge amounts of data. We're talking behavioral observations from videos, maybe eye tracking data, neuroimaging scans, genetic information, things humans might miss or struggle to integrate. It could potentially spot subtle patterns associated with ASD much earlier.
So potentially flagging risks sooner, getting kids support earlier.
Exactly. That's the hope. Overcoming some of the current barriers to early diagnosis, improving access to early intervention, which we know is really beneficial.
And beyond diagnosis.
Personalized interventions and support. This is another really promising avenue.
Like what?
Imagine AI-driven tools for social skills training that adapt to the individual user, or therapeutic robots designed to help practice communication in a safe, predictable way. Even virtual assistants that could help manage sensory sensitivities, maybe adjusting lighting or sound profiles.
Wow, that sounds almost sci-fi, but I guess it's becoming reality.
It is. AI can provide real-time feedback, adapt strategies on the fly based on how someone is doing. Think about personalized learning apps tailored to unique learning styles and paces.
That could be game-changing for education.
Potentially. And some researchers are developing AI for emotional analysis, helping caregivers, or even the individuals themselves, better understand emotional states based on facial expressions or vocal tone.
That could be incredibly helpful, given the social communication differences.
It could. And on a bigger scale, AI analyzing massive data sets might help us untangle the complexities of ASD, identify subgroups, maybe even speed up the discovery of genes and biological pathways involved, leading, hopefully, to more targeted treatments down the line.
Okay, that's a lot of potential. Now, our listener also brought up some specific comparisons. First, distinguishing ASD from similar conditions like ADHD and that social communication disorder, SCD.
Right, good to clarify. So ASD and ADHD, both neurodevelopmental, can co-occur, but their core features are different. ADHD is primarily about challenges with attention, hyperactivity, impulsivity.
Right.
ASD's core is the social communication differences and the restricted repetitive behaviors. While attention can be tricky in ASD too, you might also see that intense focus we talked about.
And SCD.
SCD, as we said, involves the social communication difficulties understanding pragmatics, non-literal language, social rules of conversation, but without the restricted interests or repetitive behaviors of ASD. That's the dividing line in the DSM-5.
Got it. Another point was about understanding human emotions and AI's role.
Yeah, AI is being trained to recognize emotional expressions from faces, voices, etc. This technology could potentially be adapted into tools to help autistic individuals who find interpreting emotions challenging, maybe providing real-time cues or feedback during interactions.
And assistive technology for social understanding.
Potentially, yes.
The listener also had some interesting personal theories about ASD's origins, like it being related to pain relief or societal success. How do those line up with the science?
It's always valuable when people think deeply about these things. However, the current scientific understanding really points to ASD as a neurodevelopmental condition with biological origins, that complex mix of genes and environment affecting brain development we discussed.
So not really an adaptation for pain relief or directly linked to wealth trends.
Not based on the current evidence, no. While autistic individuals absolutely have unique strengths and make huge contributions, linking the condition's origin directly to those kinds of broad societal factors isn't supported scientifically. And the core traits usually appear in early childhood, well before those factors would typically play out.
Okay. And they also brought up some tough topics. Cruelty, blame, the need for support.
Yeah, these are important. Intense emotions can sometimes manifest outwardly in complex ways, and the spectrum means experiences vary hugely. Unfortunately, bullying and lack of appropriate support are very real, serious problems faced by many autistic individuals and families. It's a societal issue we need to address.
And crucially, parents don't cause autism.
Absolutely not. That needs constant reinforcement. Regarding blame, some research touches on differences in theory of mind, understanding others' intentions, which might sometimes influence how blame is perceived or assigned in social situations for some individuals on the spectrum. It's complex.
Finally, there were some big philosophical questions asked.
Right. It's important to remember ASD is a specific clinical neurodevelopmental condition. It's not, a metaphor for the human condition itself. While AI might analyze data related to life outcomes, things like subjective experience, consciousness, the meaning of life or death, those are really philosophical or existential questions, way beyond the scope of defining ASD.
That provides a lot of clarity on those specific points. Thank you. So, pulling this all together, how do we foster better understanding and support in society? Education seems key.
It's absolutely fundamental. Spreading accurate information about what ASD is, the sheer diversity within the spectrum, the strengths people have alongside the challenges, that's how we start breaking down myths, reducing stigma, and building acceptance.
What are good ways to explain ASD, say, to children?
Keep it age appropriate, obviously.
Yeah.
Talking about how everyone's brain works a bit differently can be a good start.
Like brain diversity.
Exactly. Explaining that some people's brains process information, like sounds or social cues, in a unique way. Highlighting strengths is just as important as talking about challenges. Maybe someone is amazing at remembering facts or noticing details others miss.
Focusing on the individual.
Yes, focus on the individual person, their specific strengths and needs, rather than stereotypes, and just encouraging open, honest questions and conversations, making it okay to talk about differences.
We briefly mentioned laughter earlier. What's the connection there with social interaction and ASD?
Well, laughter is a big part of social bonding for most people. For autistic individuals, it can still be important for regulating emotions, reducing stress, connecting with others.
Does it manifest differently?
Sometimes it might, yes.
Yeah.
The triggers for laughter or how it's expressed can vary. Understanding an individual's unique sense of humor and way of expressing joy is important for positive interactions.
And given that huge diversity across the spectrum, what's the bottom line for navigating different needs and circumstances?
I think the absolute bottom line is individualization. Recognizing that vast range of experiences and support needs is step one.
Tailoring the approach.
Exactly. Things like sensory sensitivities, reliance on routines, communication preferences, these all shape someone's daily life. So accommodations need to be tailored. That might mean sensory-friendly spaces, using visual supports, being very clear and direct in communication, respecting routines and preferences. It's about meeting the person where they are.
This has been a really comprehensive deep dive. We've covered so much: the definition, the history, how prevalent it is, the wide-ranging impact, the biology, ethics, even AI.
Yeah, it really is multifaceted. And that AI piece holds significant promise, doesn't it? For earlier identification, more personalized support, and just deepening our fundamental understanding.
Definitely. But it's also clear there's still so much to learn. Ongoing research, better education, finding those effective, truly individualized support strategies that work seems vital.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing journey.
Well, thank you for guiding us through all of that with such clarity. It really underscores how A deeper understanding of neurodiversity isn't just about one condition. It can actually help us reshape how we think about society and create more inclusive spaces for everyone.
That's a great point. And maybe a final thought for you listening is to reflect on that. How can embracing neurodiversity, really understanding these different ways of experiencing the world, help us build better, more supportive communities for absolutely everyone?
This is DigitView.